Let's talk more about dealing with frustration and disappointment. Remember last time we talked about the circle of control. Things that you can control, things that you can influence, and things that you have no control over. And we talked about where it's best to focus your attention. I'm pleased that you liked the videos. Thank you for all the feedback you gave me on that, by the way. Really appreciate that. And if there's anything that you would find it useful for me to cover in upcoming videos, then put a comment on this post, send me a message, and I'll see what I can do. Let me share with you an experience I had a couple of years ago. I was invited along to a meeting at a company where I was about to start to do some work. Now this was a sales meeting, and at this point I'd not met anybody from that department. At the start of the meeting, a guy stood up and he said, "Last month I worked harder than I've ever worked before. I called more people than I've ever called before. And as a result, I made more appointments than I've ever made before." Now at this point, I'm expecting him to carry on and say, "And I made more sales than I've ever made before, and this is how much money I made," perhaps as a way to motivate other people in the team. But he didn't. He carried on and said, "And you know how sometimes we make appointments to go and see people and they cancel at the last minute? Well, none of them did. So as a result of my hard work, I got to sit in front of more people than I've ever done before. And as a result, I made no sales and I made no commission. Not what I was expecting." And I found out afterwards that he is one of the most successful people in the history of the company. Now, he must have had a way to deal with the disappointment that for a lot of people would have probably floored him at that point. Let's come back to that story in a few minutes. I'd like to introduce you to a concept from NLP that we call frames. Frames is quite a big subject, so we're just going to deal with one little aspect of it today, but it's a very important and useful aspect. Now, I think that the name frames comes from the concept of a picture frame. So we have a picture and we want to hang it on the wall. Very often we put it in a frame. Sometimes that frame is purely practical, it's a way to hang it on the wall. Other times the frame can be decorative and it can be used to highlight certain aspects of the picture. If the picture is really dark, we might put a dark frame around it to really highlight the dark aspects of it. Or if the picture's got a lot of bright colours in there, we might put a lighter coloured frame around it as a way to bring out those colours. The same can be true with life. We can put different frames around life, and as a result of that, we can create different perspectives. So let's imagine that we've got a picture of some flowers that's maybe this big. And what if our frame is only this big and we put it around the centre of the picture? What we might see is a dead flower on its own. Not a very inspiring picture. Now it could be that if we move that frame somewhere else on the picture, we might see a beautiful flower in full bloom. But this isn't about moving the frame around. This is about what if we change the size of the frame. So what if we have that frame in the centre and we see that one dead flower? What if we were to enlarge the frame so we can see more of the picture? What we might see at that point is a field full of beautiful flowers in full bloom with just one dead flower in the middle. It's a completely different perspective. Let's imagine that you wanted to grow a flower from a seed, and you might plant that seed in your garden, and 6 months later you've got a beautiful flower in full bloom and you can sit in your garden, you can enjoy it on a sunny summer afternoon. Now, if you were to take a frame and put it around the first 2 days of you planting that seed, you'd look at it and you'd say, this is a waste of time. Nothing's happening. And what if you moved that frame to maybe weeks 2 and 3, you might say, I wanted a beautiful flower and all I've got is this tiny little shoot coming up through the ground. This isn't working, that was a waste of time. And what if you moved that frame to the last 2 days of that flower being in full bloom? You might say, wow, this flower in 2 days, it grew 2 inches and it had this tiny little head on the top, and suddenly it's this beautiful big flower. Don't flowers grow quickly? And none of those is the truth. None of those is the whole truth. You don't see the whole truth until you change the frame size to take in the whole process. The same's true of life, isn't it? Have you ever had a bad day? Have you ever had a day when nothing that you do goes to plan? And on top of that, maybe it even feels like other people are deliberately obstructing you and making your life difficult, and perhaps you're not feeling great on that day either. If you put a frame around that day and say, that's my life, you're going to look at your life and say it sucks. And that might be a not very good day in the context of a great week. It could be a not very good week in the context of a great month. It could be a poor month in the context of a great year, or it could be the worst year that you've ever had in the context of the best decade that you've ever had. Sometimes when we're feeling disappointed, we're feeling frustrated, all we need to do is enlarge that frame size. I haven't achieved anything in the last 2 days, but look what I've done in the last month. Now, going back to that sales guy, I don't think he knew anything about NLP frames. I think he just instinctively knew not to focus on the little picture. And sometimes all we need to do is change that frame size and look at the big picture, and we can change the way that we feel. So now you've got 2 ways of dealing with frustration and disappointment. One is to focus your attention on things that you can control, or at least things that you have some influence over. And the second is to change the frame size and look at things in their proper perspective.